Hello, everyone. Welcome to a rather different version of the Believeland Brits podcast. Today, we're going to do a live mailbag. Quite a few of you have brought in your questions. We're going to go through it. It's the final quarter of the NFL regular season. So let's get it started. You're listening to the Believeland Brits podcast. Yes, I've officially relegated the intro now, folks. I've said that I would for several weeks. I've now officially moved that way. I actually don't think that there is anyone on our active roster, maybe Njoku, who is actually on that intro. So I think that we'll retire that and we'll go with something else. Yes, hello everyone. A small little week and a half to 2 week hiatus. It wasn't because we were as angry as everyone was with our performance in LA. We simply just could not make the times work. It's that time of year, Christmas, all the rest of it. But we decided to give back a little bit and answer some of your questions with me. Both of the Believeland Brits alongside me. Wine, how you doing, mate? And can you actually talk?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one to see how many times, like, if anyone wants to have a little drinking game, and every time my voice cracks, then have a shot or something. I think you'd probably be relatively well oiled by the end of this podcast. So there's a game for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on you and keep yourself lubricated. Yeah, I can see you coughing already. It's going to be a delight for anyone that's watching on the live feed tonight. Sean, how are you, mate? I mean, we both went down to the North Cotswolds showing of the game over the weekend. Both very jolly at the end of that. How's your week been after that, mate?
It was good, mate, until I dropped you off. You know about my dilemma getting home on Sunday evening. Birmingham's roadworks on a Sunday night was the last thing I expected to tackle, but all good, mate. All good. Victory Monday just feels so much better, doesn't it? So much better. It's amazing what difference a good weekend sporting-wise can make. So, yeah, feeling good, mate, and genuinely quite humbled, as you said, by the amount of questions that we've had in such a short space of time, because I've been around these podcasts for a while now in different forms, and sometimes you put a request out, it's like tumbleweed, isn't it? But we've been absolutely inundated, mate. So I've got the thermos flask loaded up, mate, and I'm ready for a long evening. So crack on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you to everyone that put in your questions. We only put it out about an hour ago. We had something like 20 odd questions. I've had to boil it down to 10. So, Mark, I apologize. I won't be asking as to what everyone's favorite flavor of Skittle is, nor will I be asking them asking these two why it's a boxing ring and not a boxing cube. I think that one was Spencer. I think we'll relegate those ones and go for some of the more real ones. We've had obviously a fair bit of news over not just the past couple of weeks, but just today, of which we'll also get into as part of the mailbag. So yes, thank you to everyone that's putting your questions. I would say if you have any other questions, please put them into the chat tonight, but we just don't have time already. Right, so Mark has requested the answer to the Skittles question. I'll give you mine. How about that? Purple all the way.
I'll give you mine as well. I've heard a rumor on the grapevine that they all taste the same if you don't look at what color it is. I don't think that's true myself, but I would like to see, Mark, if you want to send in a video of you trying them all with your eyes closed and seeing if you can guess the flavors, then that'll be a good one.
Yes, in fact, please do that, and then we'll then reveal our flavors. You've already got mine, but
I've got to be honest, mate. The new one for me, I don't know if you've seen them yet, is the desserts ones. I don't know if you've seen them in a pink bag. They are phenomenal. Smoothies and all sorts, absolutely fantastic, mate. Yeah, I'm normally like a berry one, so only a red or a purple in the standard bag. But yeah, these dessert ones, mate, are something else. I've got to say, get yourself a bag of them if you haven't tried them yet.
Oh, that just sounds like sacrilege to me. Anyway, we have already gotten ourselves sidetracked. It has been 4 minutes and 53 seconds since I've put this put this on and we have not hit a single question yet. We've got 10 of them to get through, and we'll start with what probably the biggest surprise. 2 weeks ago said that I was probably the most surprised I could possibly be, the fact that I'd be rooting for Joe Flacco. Of all the human beings on this earth, Joe Flacco was one of the ones well down the list. Obviously a stellar performance, apart from that one interception throw, which was just god awful on Sunday. If you've seen any of the mic'd up stuff with him, or the post game or the post game dressing room chat, I thoroughly recommend it. He just seems like a really nice guy, and all the rest of it. The questions of which we've got in, how far can we go with him? First of all, after seeing the performance on Sunday on the offensive side of the ball, knowing what the defensive side of the ball is like, even when we have to chop and change. We're 8-5. We've got the 4th best record in the AFC, even though we're the 5th seed. What is the ceiling for this? What's the ceiling for this team with Joe Flacco under center?
I think it's really, really hard to answer the question, knowing like how many injuries we keep getting on a daily basis. Because if you sort of asked this question 2-3 weeks ago, you'd be saying, if Joe Flacco can just stay average and the offense can stay average, then the defense should be able to carry them pretty far. But now, knowing the amount of injuries are starting to stack up on the defense, you're now asking a little bit more of the offense every week. That said, the offense looks really good, and I think it's been mentioned by a couple of people already this week, and I've heard it mentioned a few times, but Stefanski's a lot more comfortable with Joe Flacco under center, just because he's able to run the offense that he's obviously excuse me, that he's grown up running. Like, we've seen him having to chop and change the style of offense that he likes to run with Deshaun Watson this season already, and we've seen that it had mixed success, to put it mildly. But with Joe Flacco back there, he's been able to go back to his roots, which have made the opening script, which under Watson wasn't as consistent as it normally is under Stefanski.
Yeah,
the scripts under Joe Flacco have been phenomenal, and you've just seen the way he's been able to sort of get through a game by showing a defense something in the first quarter and then being able to flip that completely in the fourth and do something completely tendency breaking. It just shows you the comfortability that he has, with a QB under center, which, I'm sure over the next few months to a year, we'll have a bunch of different questions about where that sort of goes down the road. But as it pertains to the next few weeks and the next couple of months, it could mean that the offense is in a position to maybe carry the defense when it needs to be carried. And, that obviously leads to success for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? We're in such a strong position now in terms of the record, as you say, that almost unrealistically, it feels like anything other than the playoffs now would be slightly disappointing, which is so unfair, really, given everything that's already happened.
Yeah.
I've sort of already said more than once, we probably should be closer to the number 1 overall pick than the number 1 seed in the playoffs, which, there's still potentially a path to that. We don't get too carried away, but ultimately no one in the AFC is really separating themselves. We saw the Dolphins lose on Monday night in a real surprise. The Chiefs lost again. So there's nobody really that's standing out from the crowd, so to speak. And we've obviously already beaten the Ravens, who currently are the number 1 seed. He's given people hope and optimism, hasn't he? He's given people a sense of calmness, and I think that's the thing. Any sort of fear, and I do feel a little bit for DTR in this, because I think it's just the fact that he's a rookie, and I think there's so many scars from that first performance, which was so unfair for him to be thrown into in hindsight. And I'm sure if you could ask Stefanski to change any single thing from this season, regardless of any of the injuries and all the rest of it, there's plenty of obvious things that you'd want to change. I think the one thing he would probably do differently, if he could do everything all over again and he had the same circumstances, is I don't think he'd have played DTR that week. Because I think, unfortunately, it's really created this volume around him that there was this real fear going into that Pittsburgh game. And I thought he played reasonably well given the playbook he was given. And then I actually thought he did really well the following week in the game against Denver. Now, me and you were talking in the car on the way home. We never know how that game pans out. Let's say he goes on and he makes that fourth quarter comeback and he doesn't suffer the concussion. Joe Flacco's not even on the roster then at that point.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
So it's certainly a sort of peculiar set of circumstances that has got him to where he's got to. I'm taking nothing away from him. He's been brilliant in terms of off the shelf, no game prep. It throws up a whole load of questions and excuses about what's happened in the last 12, 18 months with other quarterbacks. Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Not yet.
Reality,
One of the future question, don't worry.
Off season's coming. But yeah, the reality is he's given us a real steady hand. And ultimately, we've said all year long, Wine said it perfectly, if the offense can just be average, we're going to be there or thereabouts. And we've said that pretty much consistently. If the offense can be average, we're there or thereabouts. He played well on Sunday. At times, me and you sat there, and it was like, bloody hell, those stats seem a lot better than the actual performance. Because when you look at it back, we had 3 turnovers. Flacco was responsible for 2 of them. A fumble and an interception. Cooper was the other one that fumbled. We had 8 punts. That's 11 drives that didn't really produce anything. So ultimately, yes, there was plenty of good. I'm certainly not, like I say, trying to be the party pooper and all the rest of it. But I think he gives us that opportunity to be what we wanted to be, which is a competent enough offense that if we can get the right side of the turnover battle, the defense can play well, we've got a legit shot at winning any game, it seems.
Yeah, I'd agree to that as well. And, you speak about Flacco, giving you that hope. You go out and also that sense of calm, at no point over the last 2 weeks whilst, Flacco's been on the, under center, have I felt that I'm panicking about what's happening next. There's been a couple of times where a really good blitz has caught him off guard, or, there's been the odd errant throw, but it's not been one where I go, oh God, are we even going to be able to move the ball in the next 2, 3, 4 drives? And I think that that's the only reason as to why he's there at the moment. It's in a world of chaos. If you can have that stabilizing influence, it helps. The other half of this question is one of which sort of looks to the future. So, it looks like Flacco is going to sign with the team eventually. Do we see him staying long term as some form of backup, or do we potentially see him with another team, as a QB2, or maybe in some circumstances even as a QB1 when you consider some of the QBs that are currently out there. In an interview with MKC, he said that he was just focusing on the here and now, etc. But it's something which has already been mentioned in other circles. Personally, I reckon he could well be a backup for a year or two in a QB needy QB needy situation. But what do you guys think?
I personally don't buy it. I think he may do what he did this year, which is, obviously take his time, not sign anywhere for a few months, and then if a challenger comes, call in midway through a season, then it makes sense for him to do it. I think you look at the motivations that he's clearly had to come back to play football this year. One of them, obviously, to be playing in front of his children, which is a great motivator to have. Another one of them is that he still feels like he's got something within him to go and win games. And I think you look to the situation he was in last year, which was obviously backing up Zach Wilson. I don't foresee him wanting to go back into a situation like that. I don't think he'll want to put in the time and effort to go to training camp and go through all of that pain that he'll have to go through throughout a whole season just to get a rookie ready to play, or back up someone that he may think he's better than, like I would imagine what the case was with New York and Zach Wilson. So I think unless a situation falls into his lap like this one, I think he'll just stay home from just from listening to his press conferences and stuff, that's the vibe I get personally.
Fair enough, Sean. Anything different to that? I mean, it's a valid point. Obviously he's at that age where, it could well come down to him himself just not having the motivation, and obviously he's been away for, a fair bit of time before being called up. So it is fair there. I just wonder if there's a differing POV there.
No, listen, I completely agree. That would be my take on it as well. I think that's what he would, in all likelihood, do. I also think, and this is why I sort of posed the question in the Facebook group ahead of the announcement of Flacco starting about which QB would start, because it's one of those awkward ones, because almost for the long term of the Browns, it's almost better that DTR was the person starting now, because you want to know next year if we're in the situation of needing a backup QB again, is DTR good enough or not? But I could understand with the situation we're in so close to the playoffs, it's all about the here and now. So I could see that going either way, and I was more than happy whichever decision they ultimately went with. But I do think it sort of puts them into a little bit of a quandary in terms of next off season, because what we don't want is a load of criticism again about, they haven't got the right backup quarterback on the roster. I mean, if the main thing you can criticise the GM and the head coach about is that we haven't got the right backup quarterback, then sign me that GM and head coach up forever, because that's the one position I don't want to be worried about. So ultimately, I think, as Owen said, he just sits out, waits for an opportunity. If one presents itself, great. If it doesn't, then why on earth would he put his body through it? So that's what I would do if I was him.
Yeah, I guess that Andrew, just to be sidetracked for a moment here, because obviously I advocated for, at least to look at a better backup. I guess that really all of that argument has been
sorry, I was clearing my throat.
But I guess it's been mooted essentially because of the fact that you can't exactly expect a GM to have a good backup, which is where we're at. We're that far back now.
You look at the situation that we're in. Who would you rather have right now? The QB that everyone was killing Andrew Berry for trading away preseason, who just got benched for the second time this season for two different teams, or would you rather have Joe Flacco? Because I sure as hell would rather Joe Flacco. I'd rather DTR. I think you look back at that decision that Andrew Berry made in the offseason that he got slaughtered for just a month or two ago. He absolutely made the right decision.
It's just panic, isn't it? That's more what it is. It's panic, and it's looking for someone to blame, because injuries are so cruel, and they're not just cruel on the people who they happen to or the team around them, but also for the fan base, because there is literally nothing you can do whilst you're watching that person get carted away. And you would give your own limbs to be able to see them pull it around. You'd want your limbs back at the end of the game, but you would happily give them the health for those 3 hours. And if we just look at the injury list, because I'm going to come on to Stefanski in the question, just so you can prepare yourself, is he coach of the year material? And will we extend him before the start of the new season? Let me just reel off the list of injuries that the Browns have got out for the season. This is all the players out for the season, right? Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson, Jack Conklin. We'll go all the way back to Jack Conklin on week 1. Jed Wills, DeJuan Jones, Jacob Phillips, Rodney McLeod, Jakeem Grant, Michael Woods, Grant Delpit until the end of the regular season. Ogbo Okoronkwo expected to be out for the rest of the season. Maurice Hurst announced yesterday. Marquise Goodwin. Marquise Goodwin was another noticeable injury. Of the noticeable injuries, Myles Garrett's got a shoulder complaint. Denzel Ward's been out again with a number of injuries. Amari Cooper was out for a bit. Anthony Walker missed weeks. DTR obviously had to step out. Greg Newsome stepped out. Even Pokic is now a concern. Juan Thornhill's a concern. Grant Delpit. I'm reading two separate lists here. Jordan Elliott, Cameron Mitchell. It's a staggering list. We're like third in terms of the longest IR list currently. But the actual severity of the quality of those players puts us right at the top and far and away the top. So you look at that, you look at how we're still staying competitive in pretty much every single game. You look at the fact that we've got an insane strength of victory. Our strength, I think we're 6-1 against teams with a positive record. You look at all that and you think there is no way on this green earth that Stefanski should be nothing but lauded for what he's done this year. It's been nothing short of insane. If he doesn't get coach of the year, then they just don't take this sort of thing into account and just go for what's sexy on paper, because this is grit, determination, and what the NFL is looking for, at least what they were looking for. Is anyone really in a position to shout that down?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think as a podcast, we've been sort of advocating for this for a while, that he should be top of that list. And, I don't think anything has changed since we started talking about it in a negative fashion to sort of dispel what we've been saying. But, I think what you can say about Coach of the Year, that it's not always the Coach of the Year that probably wins it. Yeah. I think it is very narrative based. I think I saw the odds earlier. He's about 4th or 5th favourite.
Who's current favourite out of interest?
D'Amico Ryans for the Texans is current favourite.
Yeah, I guess
I suppose you could understand with CJ Stroud as the rookie QB and sort of the records that they've been coming off last few years, very similar to Stefanski's first Coach of the Year, I would think. And so it is very narrative driven. But if you're looking at it objectively, and like you said, looking at the strength of our wins and being on QB4 and all the injuries that have come with it, I think, you'd be hard pressed to find someone better equipped to win that award than Kevin Stefanski. And, obviously the other question that came with this was, should the Browns extend him before the 2024 season? And I think they'd be stupid not to. I really do. I think, you could look at the downsides to not doing it, and there's probably not too many, because, nobody's going to poach him. Like, it's not like our version of football where, a bigger club could come in and poach him for an insignificant amount of money and he'd be gone. But, the lift that I would probably give to the locker room who clearly, love him to bits because they've ridden with him for 4 straight years, 4 different locker rooms. I think we forget that sometimes, that a lot of turnover happens in the NFL, and he's managed to keep these players together every single year for the last 4 years. And I think he's shown incredible leadership, especially this year. He's shown a different side to him this year as well. Obviously, we spoke about last year that he needed to get rid of his friends, when it came to special teams coordinator, when it came to defensive coordinator. We said that he needed to show a little bit of grit. We needed to see a bit of ruthlessness from him to get rid of those two for the betterment of the team. He done that, and he's reaped the rewards of it. So I think that probably goes a little bit unmentioned, because you hear a lot of people saying that the success is on Schwartz this year rather than Kevin Stefanski, but he oversees the whole thing, which is important to take note. And I still think he's got a ton, offensively to contribute to this team. And I think we've seen it over the last couple of weeks of how clever he actually is as a play caller. Again, there'll be questions of when this goes back to a shotgun heavy team with Watson, how does that look, and whether he can adapt to it long term. But I couldn't think of a better person to take this team forward than Kevin Stefanski, and I think they'd be dull not to extend him at the end of the season.
Yeah. Sean, I imagine that you're the same. I know that we've spoken a lot about, Kevin Stefanski and his many benefits and what he's brought to the team. My question to you might be slightly different, to sort of stop it from just being a duplication there, of looking at those that have sought to, sort of demerit him and, want to look elsewhere. Is it essentially just a separation of offense versus the whole damn thing. Because as Wine says there, you have to look at it as, Kevin Stefanski is the whole team. So, is it more that sort of has people on edge?
I think where Stefanski unfortunately suffers, and it's through no fault of his own, is I think when the hire was made, he was hired as Kevin Stefanski, offensive guru, offensive genius. He was going to be the guy that was going to absolutely transform that side of the ball. They then go and spend so much money on a quarterback, and everyone just assumed that this offense would be putting up 30 plus points routinely and blowing teams away. What we've probably ended up with is Kevin Stefanski, the brilliant people manager, the brilliant guy in terms of the way that he approaches his press conferences and the way he conducts himself. There's been this niggling thing, that's nagged me for a long time, where people get angry that he doesn't get angry, and I'm like, did you see Patrick Mahomes the weekend? Do I want my head coach looking like a 5-year-old child on the side of the field when something goes against him? He shows enough emotion. I loved his celebration with the David.
I've had that on repeat.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I do think slowly but surely, a lot of the fan base are slowly but surely turning around to the fact that actually, do you know what? He's pretty good. I would ask anybody that sort of wants to move on from him, well, who are we moving on to? There's no obvious names that really spring to mind. I know Johnson's the one from the Lions that gets a lot of love. He'll probably end up somewhere. But realistically, there's nobody instantly that's springing out to mind in terms of a surefire slam dunk candidate. I still find it staggering we have the conversation when you look at his record. I know for some people it's all about, well, he hasn't won the division, he hasn't won the Super Bowl, he hasn't. Well, yeah, but there's 32 other franchises that are all trying to do exactly the same thing. It's a hard thing to do. What he's got is he's got the foundations right, he's got the processes right. This is the thing about going for it on fourth down and things like that. It might not work every time, but if you do it more often than not, do the right things more often, you'll get the results more often than not. And that's what I really like about him. I think he's fantastic. I could play the devil's advocate, don't extend him, see how next year goes, and then you can decide. But ultimately, let me guarantee you now, they could give him a 10-year extension. If we go 0-17 next year, he'll be fired. Makes no difference how long his contract is. So for everything that Owen said, I completely agree. I think it'd be a real lift to him as an individual. I think it'd be a real lift to the players. I think it needs to sort of bring the fan base together, to be honest, because, like I say, I'm quite comfortable in this conversation because I think it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen. It's just a case of when rather than if. But for all those that are still clamouring for a move, like I say, I may well be proven wrong, but I think ultimately it's definitely going to happen. So, like I say, for me, the sooner we get it done, the better. I think it'll be good for everybody. I think he thoroughly deserves it. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal this year. And ultimately, he's in the coach of the year conversation. Those odds are what those odds are today. I pretty much guarantee you, gents, if we win the next 4 games, let's win them first. If we win the next 4 games, we could well be the number 1 seed, could well win the division for the first time since forever. If he's not coach of the year with everything that you've said there, mate, then somebody really needs having a good look at in terms of the voting process, because it'd be an absolute travesty.
I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but seeing as you have instigated it, I think you've seen the same thing that I've seen, of which is that if the Ravens lose any 2 of their games, and they do have to play the 49ers and the Dolphins, there's 2 that I remember off the top of my head. If they lose any 2 of their 4 and we win all 4, it is highly likely that the Browns would end up the number 1 seed on 12-5. And I look at that, and then I look at our schedule, and I think about what if we had half the injury list that we have, and I think, if only we had even give me 3 of the guys on IR back. And we're talking about that with what we've gone through this year. That's mad. Right, I can see that we've just hit the halfway mark, and I've still got, Christ, I think that's 8 questions left there. So I'm going to combine some in one because I think that I can here. I think they all kind of touch upon the same thing. So Watson's 5-year contract. We're currently coming to the end of year 2. We still don't know what we've got there, but in terms of benefiting, seeing that as a tangible benefit, right? But also looking at, the end of that 5 years sort of being the end of the prime years for our 3 key players outside of the quarterback. So Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward. Those 3 have also gone through some heavy injuries. Obviously, Nick Chubb is probably only likely to be around for half of a season next year. And there's a question that we've had through saying, do we even see him play next year? And what kind of player do we see there? Denzel Ward, do we really see him properly healthy ever again? Is it a case that he's going to is it going to be a case of with Denzel Ward that, we should only expect him to be around for half a season and maybe only for 3 or 4 more years? And would we even be lucky to see that? And then with Myles Garrett, he gets banged up towards this time of year, almost every year now. Do we, is there a case of urgency now when you look at that and you look at a season like this that makes you think we need to turn this now before this talent ends up just having to go because of injuries, more than anything else, or maybe that's already happening? Do you guys have that sense of urgency or that sense of fear there?
It's already
happening.
Yeah, it's already happened. It happened 2 years ago. It happened 2 years ago when they made that move for Watson. That's exactly what that was. They looked at the roster. They looked at the ages of these players. They looked at the time they had left with them and the peaks of their powers and when it was going to be. And they said, can we afford to risk taking a rookie? Or do we afford to give Baker Mayfield a big contract without knowing that he can really justify it? Or do we go and make a big move to potentially push that QB ceiling and push it quickly? And that's exactly why they made that move. I think when it comes to asking a question of have they wasted the talent, because I think that was one of the questions that was asked of us, I don't think you can say yes. I think you can look at the result of it and maybe argue the case that maybe they have in a, purely by looking at the results. But you look at the process, they gave up a, first overall pick for Baker Mayfield in the hope that he was going to drive this franchise in the right direction. And he did drive it in the right direction for, up to a point. And then when that wasn't quite enough, they went out and spent $230 million and 3 first-round picks on a QB that they thought could raise that bar considerably and take advantage of all that talent. And did they get that decision right? I don't think they did. I don't think either, like any of the 3 of us, think that they particularly made the right decision with that one. But you look at the alternatives. Was there any really there? Drafting Kenny Pickett, drafting Malik Willis, getting Derek Carr was the other one. There wasn't a great deal of options at the time. So you look at the process they went through to see, right, how are we not going to waste this talent? And there wasn't a great deal of options there. For me, personally, it's easy to say in hindsight, but I think I was banging the drum for them to wait a year with Baker. And
trade up for someone like CJ Stroud.
For Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or Richardson or whatever, because you could see sort of that talent was coming through the year after. But you're still wasting a year in that scenario. You don't know how close you're going to be able to trade up for those 3 players. You don't know where they're going to go in the draft. For all they know, they could have gone 1, 2, 3, it was pretty close. I think it was 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah. So essentially, you're saying that the trade all along was because that was a recognizable
there was
window. The window is there basically, and then something for you, Sean, to then sort of wrap up on that. to sort of answer the, are we going to see the value for this contract with Deshaun Watson? I'm assuming. Let's try and turn that on its head, because we all know that the only way of which you can answer that is how long's a piece of string. But in terms of defining the string, we're essentially saying success with this squad now. Essentially, we're basically talking about bowl games.
Yeah, look, I think we've got to be optimistic. The last time we saw him, he had his best game as a Cleveland Brown. We have to be optimistic. We have to take that forward ultimately. And as much fun as this whole Flacco, DTR, whoever it is at the minute is, and great, let's ride it and let's hope it leads us all the way to February. The reality is, come September next year, it needs to be number 4 back under centre, and he needs to be playing well. And that's regardless of if either of them lead us to a Super Bowl, God knows whatever else might happen this year. It still needs to be Watson in September. Ultimately, we have to be optimistic. It's going to start to cost. I don't think some people have necessarily realised how much we've just sort of pushed it down the line. Yeah, there's the expectation the cap will grow. If you follow our friend Jack Duffin, he's very, very good with all the cap stuff and everything. I sign up to the OBR. We're not paid by the OBR in any way, but I'd fully recommend getting yourselves over there. They do some really good coverage of stuff. Cap's not going up as much as expected. So that's going to be a little bit of a hamstring as well. But ultimately, we've said it all along, he needs to play well to justify the trade. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter about the team's results around it. He should be judged on his performance, in that if the Browns are division winners despite him, we can't still sit here and say it was a successful trade. So ultimately, I'd like to think that, yes, we will see the best of him. I think, like so, we have to take the fact that the last time we saw him was certainly the best he'd looked in a Browns uniform. And ultimately, let's hope he does come back. And I think, to Owine's point, we've got another few years window, ultimately, with these players. It's so hard to predict anybody's injuries. The Denzel Ward one's a bit strange because it obviously seemed as though he was going to play last weekend and he didn't for whatever reason. Thankfully, it doesn't sound as though it's concussion related, which has obviously been the concern with him up to this point in his career. And same with Garrett, you said it yourself, mate. He's seemingly the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year for the first 8 to 10 weeks of every season, and then something happens and he has a real quiet end to the season by his standards. And that's almost seems to be what's happening again here, really. He sort of, had obvious issues with the shoulder and limitations, and it's kind of slowed him down in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Hopefully he can have a big sort of end in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but we've got to be optimistic that the trade ultimately does work, mate.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll fire it straight back to you, Sean, because you've just led us into what is the next question here, which is, will Myles Garrett finally get that Defensive Player of the Year award this year, or do we see that, that wind down?
I think it's trending in the wrong direction over the last few weeks, as I just said. I think ultimately he was, I wouldn't say a clear favourite, but I think he was certainly, probably the sort of leading candidate, I would have said, at a certain point. Often when we talk about the Defensive Player of the Year, we often look at people that sort of disrupt the quarterback and everything. I want to give a shout out to Deron. Is it Deron Bland, the Cowboys quarterback or safety?
Yeah.
I think, hasn't he got more touchdowns than a lot of teams' wide receiver groups? I mean, him alone, just in terms of his pick sixes have been something else. So I think he's in with a shout. Ultimately, it does usually, though, like I say, go with the players that disrupt the pass game. The last 3 to win it: Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa. You've got to go back to 2019 with Stephen Gilmore, and then before that, Donald, Khalil Mack, JJ Watt. So, generally speaking, it is a defensive end or an edge player that gets it. So I'd like to think he's in with a shout, mate. But I certainly don't think it's a slam dunk. I think he's down to 4th or 5th in the league sack numbers wise now. So I think there's some work to do for him to finally get the crown.
Yeah, Wine, you're an odds man. What odds would you give him?
I'm just looking now. He's 2 to 1.
Of course you are.
He's second favourite behind Micah Parsons, and then there's quite a big drop actually to TJ Watt by the looks of it. So I think he's been quite unlucky in the last few weeks. I think if you look into it a little bit deeper, especially last week, he was getting held like pretty much every play. but 2, he was like a whisker away from about 4 strip sacks in that game. And that was purely because Lawrence was getting the ball out really quickly. You then look at the week before.
Sub 3 seconds and going the other way.
Yeah, exactly. Matt Stafford was doing the exact same thing for the Rams. So you look at it in a little bit more detail, and then you can start to put together why he hasn't had the sack production that he has in previous weeks. And then you look to next week, and this is the one that I think is a massive, massive one for him. He obviously had 4 sacks against Justin Fields last time they played against each other. Fields takes the longest to throw in the league this season on average. I think it's a smidge over 3 seconds per throw.
Nice.
So you think if he's going to have that decoy type of game, he's already had one against the Colts where he just went wild at the start of the season and blocked the field goal and everything he did in that game. If he's going to have another one of them this season, it's probably going to come this week. And then you've probably got a chance against the Bengals in week 18, should there be enough on the line. Obviously, hopefully for us, there isn't anything on the line in that week 18 game and he can just sit on the bench. But I think this week is the week that he can put his flag in the ground and say, look, this is me. This is my year. I'm taking this right here, right now. And, I think the chance is there. And I think he takes it. I genuinely do think he takes it this week. I think he gets a big game this week. I'd say 3. We'll go 3 sacks on Justin Fields this week.
Ooh, nice.
And he plants his flag, and he gets
plants the flag. I don't disagree with anything you've said, mate. I just think it's one of those awards that generally does come with stats and everything. I completely agree with you. You watch the film back, and we had this conversation with a few of the guys down in the Cotswolds on the weekend. The D-line played pretty well in those 2 defeats on the road, but like you say, the 2 opposition offences just game plan for it. Just interestingly, as you were looking at the odds, I got the odds up, and I was just looking at all of the odds for the year, and Mark's put a comment in here as well. Joe Flacco's 5th favourite comeback player of the year, gents, 20-1.
Wow.
20-1.
Okay, I tell you what, little sidetrack there. How far does Joe Flacco have to take the Browns in order to win that? We all know it's a regular season award. That's not really a regular season award.
I haven't checked the odds for comeback player of the year. We obviously spoke about that comeback player of the year in our prediction pod because we sort of looked at that one as one that, because from what I remember, Damar Hamlin was like evens or something, and then the next one was like 20-1. So we obviously looked at that and sort of thought maybe there was a couple of players I think we picked out. I think I picked out John Mechie, which hasn't worked out.
Yes, he was another favourite. Yeah,
there was a couple of them that we sort of picked out. And it's not really. I don't think there's any standout.
Damar Hamlin is now the 1-7 favourite. 1-7,
which is quite telling, isn't it?
Being inactive for about 14 weeks.
Quite telling.
In terms of the betting, it's Damar Hamlin. 2 are his next at 11-1. Then Matt Stafford 12-1, Lamar Jackson 16-1, and then Joe Flacco 20-1.
God, can we really say Lamar Jackson as comeback player of the year? Really?
Very loose. Very loose.
Just to pick up on what Sean said as well about, how much they put into, just to go back to the decoy consideration, how much the award makers put into actually disrupting the passer. Deron Bland isn't even. I don't know how many players is on this list of favourites, but I would, at a rough guess of 25 players, he's not even there.
Yeah, which is madness, and probably just shows some sort of UK bias, perhaps, that you go for names and scoreline stats. I don't know, but yeah, I found that odd as well, for sure.
Like you even have names of defensive backs, there are a couple on you. Justin Simmons is 200-1. Talanoa Hufanga is 200-1. Jesse Bates is 300-1, but no Deron Bland, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, weird one, that for sure. Like you say, I think he would need a big game next week, and on the Joe Flacco conversation. Even though it's a regular season award, I think that if Flacco won 1 to 2 playoff games, I think that that would probably sway the voters because they all vote very, very close to the end of of January anyway, of which will always sway them no matter what they say. Let's move on to the next question. A little bit more looking over rather than on particular players here. What's been your biggest surprise this year as a Browns fan? Sure.
Biggest negative surprise is that half of our season has ended up in a care home this season. That's been quite a negative surprise, I think. I don't think any of us would have envisaged sheer this amount of injuries. And then on the flip side, I think when we got the Watson news that he was out after that Baltimore game, I thought that was our season completely cooked. Like, after a few days, I started to have a little bit of blind optimism back. But realistically, I thought we were cooked after that news. So pleasantly surprised with what we've done after losing Deshaun Watson for the season.
Yeah, it's hard to not look at sort of injuries and the next man up mentality, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about it enough, so I don't want to go over it again. But you're on tackles numbers 4 and 5. Players that weren't even on the team partway through the season. You've got Nick Harris playing fullback, who's been a lineman his whole life. And shout out to him as well. He obviously stepped in and played centre for probably 90% of the game on Sunday with Pochich going down. Harrison Bryant just becoming a Swiss Army knife that lines up anywhere and will do anything that's asked of him. That whole mentality, I think you could just go through the entire roster, to be honest, and pick out plenty of players that deserve praise. But the two I'll probably pick, because we never get questions about them, is the two kickers. The two special teams guys, Dustin Hopkins on Sunday. We were sitting there and, the Browns had got that ball and we got to about the 35-yard line or there.
It was a 74.5-yard punt.
Yeah. Oh, I was talking about the field goal. The punt was incredible, but just the field goal to put us 10 up. We sort of got to that distance, and it was only when he actually lined up to kick it. It was like, oh shit, we're actually a lot further away than I thought we were. But even then, there was never a moment's fear or doubt that he was going to make it, and it's just incredible the amount of confidence that he's just given us all year. He's just been absolutely phenomenal. And, we've given plenty of love to Corey B on here before, haven't we? And again, he had a stellar game. I thought he struggled a little bit, in terms of Denver. I think lots of kickers do in terms of the altitude and everything. The one thing we'd want him to probably work on is a little bit of coughing corner. And you talked about that a fair bit at the weekend. But when he's got to put his leg through one, Jesus, has he got a leg? I think the two special teams guys have been really, really good. For special teams to not be a weakness after years of it feeling like a real poor relation, and for it to almost become a strength for the team this year has been a real pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many surprises. I mean, you guys have brought up so many anyway. The injuries is a real low-hanging fruit. Special teams is probably the best on a positional basis. For me, I mean, obviously the defense, improving to the level that it has obviously been one of the big happy surprises. But when you look at Martin Emerson, for example, and the fact that him as a starting quarterback in this league, I'm looking for that name and I'm making sure that he is definitely starting now, and this is coming from was it a 3rd round pick, of which, at the time we were sort of looking at it and thinking, God, wasn't really thinking you'd go that way, but my God, has it worked out. He's lights out, and I think that he embodies what this new defense is about. Just really, really good to see that extend. It wasn't just a 1-year wonder. He's cemented his place within that. And then, just the willingness to constantly battle. I've seen so many Cleveland Browns teams that, after getting this kind of news on a week, we haven't had it on a weekly basis like this, but we've had like 1 or 2 big injuries, and then you just sort of see the team wilt and sort of fade away. I am confident on Sunday that we will be competitive, if not win this game against the Chicago Bears. simply because I think that, that team will put every single man, woman, and child that they can on the roster in order to remain competitive. And I wish I was exaggerating. I think that at this point they will run out of healthy men in the Cleveland area to actually field a roster, but they will do so, and they will remain within 7 points of whoever it is that they are playing. So, that and that's something that you can't buy. I mean, obviously you can, but as in, it's something of which you almost can't ask for because you never see it. But we've really got that mentality, and it's brilliant. And that's, for me, just one of the really happy surprises there. I had a funny negative one about how university hospitals had extended their partnership with the Browns in February, of which was supposed to enhance performance, injury prevention, and overall health for Browns players and all Northeast Ohio patients. That's a PR blunder if ever I saw one. Let's move on to the next question. Now, this one's an interesting one, and you can read it in many different ways. I'll kick off on this, I think. Which of the big names, if any, would you think are dispensable next year? Now, you can look at this as potentially not re-signing, or potentially just, if he was unable to step up on a weekly basis and plug someone else in and be okay with it. Now, there are two surprising names that I would put into the hat. One is Deshaun Watson, just because of the fact that, and this is something of which I think it's just because I've been used to it for the last several weeks. If you're telling me that you can find a QB4 on the streets that can, to the caliber of Joe Flacco and do that, would I want it for 18 games? No. Do I think that he provides the kind of hope and stability and optimism that Watson would? Maybe not as much, but the above replacement rating is not too low at the moment. So there's that, and yes, that one might be a bit out there. The other one, and this one's really going to ruffle some feathers, Nick Chubb. Yeah, I know, and this is coming from someone that absolutely loves him. He does get you the extra yard per attempt, the extra 2 yards per attempt, and that is a tangible benefit that I don't know if he's going to come back as strong as he was from this. This is the second time he's gone through it. I don't think that the O-line is going to be, the O-line is what we're going to touch on next, by the way, but I don't think it's going to be as strong. I don't think that he's going to be as strong. And it worries me. And it makes me think that we need to start looking at another running back to eventually take over the mantle. And it's a hot take, but it's a depressing one, and it's not one that I want to make. I absolutely love the guy. I'm just, if you're asking me as to who would potentially not be there at the start of next season, and I wouldn't bat an eyelid. I mean, I'd bat an eyelid, but it's probably one of going, would we be getting the same as what we got before?
Yeah, like you said, it's a hard question to answer, isn't it? Because the reason why they are big name players is because they're worth a lot to a team.
Yeah.
They contribute the most to a team. So it's a hard question to answer without upsetting somebody who's going to be, a fan of.
Yeah. I mean, hell, it upsets me to say the names.
Yeah. No, I understand. And the way I went for it, and obviously, like you said, we're going to touch on the O-line. We're going to touch on the O-line in a minute. But that's where I would go in my decision. I think there's two names, one of which will surprise people a little bit, I think. And the other one maybe not so much. So Jack Conklin is one of them. I don't think they can get out of his contract from what I remember. I think it's his last year, and I don't think they can get out of it too easily. But obviously 2 big injuries that he's had in the last few years, contemplated retirement after the last one. can't seem to stay healthy for a massive period of time for the Browns. And they've obviously kind of replaced him already with a 4th rounder who costs nothing and has played sensationally this season, albeit his season's just been cut short. So Jack Conklin would be number 1 for me. And number 2, and again, a little bit like Chubb, I don't really want to put this one out there because fan favourite again is Joel Bitonio.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel a little bit icky for saying that as well. But
this is a terrible question, by the way.
It is a terrible question, but the fact of the matter is that the O-line needs to get cheaper. Sean mentioned it earlier on that it's becoming the time that we have to pay the piper for the moves that we've made in the last few years, and that means the roster has to get a bit cheaper. The O-line at the moment, I think, we're scheduled with Jed Wills' 5th-year option. We're scheduled to pay all 5 O-linemen next year, like second contract money.
Yeah,
which just especially when you're paying a QB top money is just not sustainable. So that offensive line needs to get a hell of a lot cheaper. Joe Bitonio earns a lot of money. I think we have seen a drop off this year from every metric that you could possibly look at. I think we have seen a drop off. I think if you'd have asked me this question at the start of the season, I would have said Wyatt Teller out of the 2 of them. But I think Wyatt Teller has actually played really well, and we haven't seen the drop off that we normally see from him towards the end of a season. So I think with him being younger and showing consistency this year, I think you would probably lean towards keeping Taylor longer term than Bitonio, which is painful as a Browns fan, because if anyone deserves success at the Cleveland Browns and deserves to be a part of it, it's him. He's been through absolutely everything with this franchise. So painfully, I think Joel Bitonio would be my second one.
Sean, round us off on this rather terrible question.
Yeah. All joking aside, these are the nice problems to have, aren't they? Because, like you say, this is unfortunately the kind of decisions that successful teams have to make year in and year out when it comes to the roster.
Make this a positive. Just put out your favourites past you.
Don't forget, I am the voice of reason on this podcast.
Yeah, someone called him the voice of reason in the Cotswolds. Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mo. Hope you're listening, buddy, and hope you're well. No, I think the offensive line needs to get cheaper. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think, look, I wouldn't put anything past Nick Chubb. I wouldn't put anything past him at all. Wouldn't surprise me if he led the league in rushing next year. He's just that. He's that way built.
Same, and I hope so. I know
that he's your favourite Brown as well. So, but I think for me, if I was looking for anybody on the offense, you guys have both gone on the offensive side. We talked about this on Sunday. If anyone, I'd probably say Amari Cooper, but that depends on who you might get in replacement. I'd love Mike Evans if he gets to free agency. I've sort of said this to you in the car on the way back. You can make the argument that's an upgrade. And whether Mike Evans would want to go to a challenger, because I don't think Tampa Bay are going to be challenging anytime soon unless they can get a sustainable QB answer, which obviously is the position we were in a couple of years ago with Baker. I think on the defensive side of the ball, I wouldn't be surprised to see Zadarius Smith not return. I think they'll look for either continued development from the likes of Alex Wright, and I think Ogbo's played well considering the contract that he was brought in on. He's almost probably took the role as edge to some extent anyway. But I think they might look to get some sort of cheaper return there. And dare I say it, down the line, there will be a decision coming on your second favourite Brown mate, JOK, because he's phenomenal, makes loads of splash plays.
They'll pay him.
But he also, the other thing with JOK, though, mate, is he's prone to take a bad angle and overcommit and everything. Anthony Walker, he's, no frills, doesn't probably have as high a ceiling, but certainly got a really, good high floor. So I think they're the ones that would probably be decisions to make. But as I said, it's not nice problems to have. You want to keep everybody, and unfortunately, we don't live in a world where you can pay everybody. So I think there will be some upset people along the way, but you got to trust the process. You've got to trust the guys that have managed to find about 70 players to contribute this year, let alone the initial 53. So we'll trust that they'll get it right. Yeah,
terrible question, but a thought-provoking one, and one of which got very, very different answers across the board as well. So thank you for that one. I'm also going to take off the what do we do at O-line and potentially with Jed Wills, because I think that we've just covered that through Owines there, and I think that everyone's in agreement that the O-line does need to get cheaper. It's just how we get cheaper there. So in the interests of trying to sneak in, well, it won't be an hour, but it will be just a touch over. We'll move on to the next. Of which is real blue sky thinking here. What will the Browns do in the draft next year? I can't even remember where we're picking.
They will.
do we have any picks?
So off the top of my head, we have a second, a third. Don't have a fourth.
Yeah, I think we have a second. Yeah, do we have our second?
We haven't got a third. Yeah, we've got our second. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We got a second, and I think we traded for a third.
No, so we have our own second and our own third, and then we have our own fifth, and then we have a multitude of sixth and seventh round picks.
Yeah. So at the moment, I would say they draft a wide receiver relatively early doors. I said that last year. And they kind of did it, I suppose. If you look at Elijah Moore, I think I could cheat and say that they did that. And then they did get Tillman in the third round as well. But this wide receiver class has the potential. I've been saying this for a couple of months. Like, I'm sure there'll be a couple of listeners to this that I've been telling this to quite forcibly for a couple of months. Everyone talks about that 2020 draft class at wide receiver, the Jamar Chase, the Jalen Wardle, that class as the best wide receiver class maybe of all time. This one's got the potential to surpass it. It's that good, and it's deep too. It is real deep. You look at
is it second round deep?
Second round deep, yeah. Like off the top of my head, Marvin Harrison, Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors, Amika Booker, Romeo Dunze. We've got loads. I've forgotten the one.
There's a reason, Sean, why we give this question to a wine and a wine only.
There's one at Oregon. There's 3 wide receivers, including Odunze at Washington, that are going to be NFL players. So I think they would be wise to take advantage of the strength of that class, given maybe what's considered one of the worst rooms that they have at the moment on the team. I think that's fair to say. Obviously, they had a better week last week, but we have been talking about the drops and stuff like that for the last month or so. So I think they could do with.
Do you think picking a wide receiver in the second round would deliver a WR1?
I think
because that would be a question. I
think his potential of it. I said sort of last year that wide receiver class last year was full of number 2s, full of wide receivers that they weren't capable of being an X receiver, but. Funnily enough, one of the only X receivers in the class, the Browns did actually end up with in Cedric Tillman. So if he develops into that X, there's loads of cool NFL players that they could draft in this class, and a load of speed as well. One player I didn't mention there was Xavier Worthy from Texas, who is like lightning in a bottle. That type of legit field stretching ability that they tried to get with Anthony Schwartz. There's a couple of them in this class that would be very, very useful for the Browns, and let's face it, they've been looking for that type of player for years. They tried to get it in Schwartz. They kept him around too long because they were hoping that it was going to come out of him at some point, and then when they realized that that ship had sailed, they bring in Marquise Goodwin. It's not really worked out there either, so they have been looking actively for this for years, and this would be a good chance, in my opinion, to hit it.
What's the I know we don't need one, but what's it looking like from a quarterback perspective this year? Because my college knowledge very limited, but if I just look at it purely from an NFL point of view and I put my NFL head on, I look at the sort of order of the draft at the minute. You got Carolina, who they drafted Bryce Young. Are they going to go the well again? Probably not. New England definitely going to go for a quarterback, you would have to imagine. But then it gets interesting after that. You look down the rest of it. Cardinals, Kyler Murray, yay, nay, might go quarterback. Commanders seem to be all behind Sam Howell. Would they go quarterback? Don't know. Titans, Will Levis, probably not going to go quarterback. The Jets, Aaron Rodgers. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting up towards sort of like 7, 8, 9, 10 range. And one thing we haven't really said with the amount of 7 and 6 teams, we're concentrating so much on the playoffs, and thankfully we're concentrating on the playoffs. But there's a real bottleneck just in the league in general, isn't there, in terms of teams between sort of 5 and 8 and 9 and 5. It's like, teams like the Chargers are at 5 and 8. Well, they're not going to go for a quarterback with Justin Herbert, for example. So, it's really strange that there's not 3 or 4 teams that instantly jump out to you and say, yeah, they're at the top of the draft and they're going to go QB. Because normally, if you get an early QB run, it means a lot of these skill players do end up being available later on, doesn't it? I just wonder if that's likely to happen or not.
Yes, that's a good point. Obviously, we have seen in the last couple of classes, like mixed QB classes, and like you said, the amount of QBs that do go in that first round does affect, obviously, what we get given in the second round. And this class is going to be really interesting. You've got 2 standout QBs at the top of the draft in Caleb Williams and Drake May, who everyone will know about really quickly if you don't already. Drake May, for me, is the best in the class. I'm biased because I'm a University of North Carolina fan, so I will take a little bit of bias on that one, but I see a lot of Justin Herbert in him. And then after that, you've still got a bunch of talent. It obviously depends on, we're a little bit early in the process of people declaring at the minute. You obviously got Jaden Daniels, who just won the Heisman out of LSU, who pushed his stock up an immense amount towards the end of the last season. He'll probably end up going pretty high. You got Michael Penix at Washington, who had a really good year statistically. Bo Nix, so that's 5. JJ McCarthy at Michigan, that's 6. Who had a really good season. I think he's pretty impressive, JJ McCarthy. And then you've got the Florida State QB who broke his leg, unfortunately, right at the end of the season. Obviously, that's made the news that's made big headlines of them missing, obviously, the college playoff because he wasn't available. Jordan Travis is his name, and I'd love for him to fall into a range that the Browns could actually take him and give him a redshirt year, similar to what the Lions have done with Malik Hooker last year. I'd love for Travis to fall to a range that the Browns can take him because I think he was having a really good season. I think he's got a lot of tools that would be really interesting to use. And do the Browns really need to use a pick on a developmental QB? Probably not, but it's fun, isn't it? It's fun. And he was probably going to be in the discussion of a late round first rounder. So if you can get him in the 4th or 3rd or the 4th because he's broke his leg at the end of the season, then why not?
Yeah, that was a fun question compared to the last one. Something that allows you to look at things with a bit more optimism, like that. And so that's pretty much all the serious ones. Here's a not so serious one for you to round things up. Obviously, Christmas around the corner and all the rest of it. So thank you for this particular Christmas themed one. If the 2023 Browns had a Christmas number 1, what would it be called? Now, I will accept, simply because this is how I've gone about it, I would accept changing the name of a current Christmas song.
So the reason we were late to this podcast is I'd spent the last 5 minutes prior to the podcast actually writing lyrics for an entire song. So I'll let you 2 answer, and I might even sing us out on the podcast, mate.
Oh, wow. Okay. I do have mine of mine if you want that extra 30 seconds. So mine is...
I was going along the lines of last Christmas, I gave you 230 million, and all you've done since is disappoint me.
Believeland Brits, not negative Nancy's. Good.
That's the only thing I could think of.
Sean, mine's even worse. Mine is I won't be on the field for Christmas.
Dearly mate.
Go on, Sean.
Does that leave me then to send us home happy? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, you're telling me you've got lyrics.
I've got lyrics. And if I could do this with a straight face and you boys don't completely piss yourselves laughing, it'll be a miracle, won't it? Get your Shaking Stevens on, boys. You ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh, here's Bartell's ready for it. Look, you ready? Mm-hmm. Players injured all around us, but we're still playing, having fun. It's playoff season, and yes, we are still standing. Merry Christmas, everyone. It's time for Flacco and Chief Njoku. Play action passes all game long. Time for pressure and intercepted passes. With MJ and Denzel, we'll be strong. We're gonna have a party, all right. I'm gonna find Jim Schwartz underneath his bobble hat and kiss by candlelight. Miles is swaying. Joel is playing. Corriba Hawkes, a punt please dear. How I wish that every day was Christmas. Hopkins field goals and lots of cheers. I've run out of lyrics, boys, but I think I did quite well there.
Incredible.
Sean. Incredible. So we're going to clip that. We're going to
I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to
tag the Browns in it, and we're going to get them to somehow share this. That was simply sensational.
Thank you, sir. Thank
you. Wow. That was, do you know, I'm lost for words. Because you had all of about 3 minutes for that.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. My wife will tell you I could do a lot in 3 minutes, my friend.
Good Lord.
Don't clip that bit, for God's sake.
No, the clipping will happen much before that. And apologies to any children listening to this. You just need to
pass the water shit.
Yeah, exactly. You can pack the dishwasher in 3 minutes. Right, folks, we'll leave it there with Sean's caramel tones sending us off. Will it be the Christmas intro? Yes, it will. But until then, I'm trying to get over to the outro here to actually play us out, and I'm just in so much shock I can't actually get there. Thank you to both Owain and Sean for joining us here. Thank you to everyone that put in questions to us, to everyone that's listened to us today. We'll be back next week for more Sean songs. That's all we're doing. It's just going to be an hour of Sean songs. That's the podcast now. Believeland Brits podcast with Sean and his caramel tones. That's all we're doing. No, until next week, hopefully with another Browns win to talk about. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Go Browns.